Hello, we are live again. So, today, as I promised to my zero viewers, I'm not gonna be doing two sessions. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm back from the gym. I've had my dinner. I'm just gonna fuck around on the internet for a bit, and then we're gonna get to work. So, by fuck around, I mean just watch some YouTube videos that from my subscriptions, and then we're gonna get into the work, which is pretty exciting. I think we're getting closer to starting the actual work. So so yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to like share the videos that I'm watching, right? Like it's not like watching YouTube videos is a bad thing, right? At least I hope that it isn't. So I was watching a YouTube video on something, uh, and this guy was like, "You should buy Bath and Body Works scented lotion." Oh yeah, I should read the size as usual. So this is one, right? Let's see if I can search it on Amazon because I don't know. I'm not able to see the results I want on Amazon. Maybe they don't have it. Let me ask ChatGPT. How do I get to know when Bath and Body Works has a sale? I wanna buy their scented lotions. I think this is the shittiest thing in ChatGPT. Like, bruh, like, what the fuck is this link? Are you just trying to make investors feel like you're inferring a lot of shit? Like, what? I don't want fucking inference for a fucking link. You fucking get it, bitch? Annoying. Um, uh, Wait, is it weekly? Huh? I don't get it. I'm not gonna follow the social media, bro. Come on. Do we not have anything in March or April? What email? Uh, yeah, I don't want to install the app either. So what we're gonna do is just oh, top offers. Yeah. Yes, this is what we want. Success. Nah, that's enough. I'm not gonna put more effort than that into this whole fucking topic. Fuck off. Okay, let me just check if there's anything on the website right now. Because there might be, right? Bath and Body Works. Let's see, offers. All offers. Travel set. See if you can do something about it. Bitch, I'm not in the US. Is that all? Yeah, I guess we don't have offers. So this is a fun video I wanna watch. This is a huge fucking interview. I do want to watch it, but also I don't want to waste a lot of time watching interviews. But also, like, I'm focusing a lot on AI stuff these days. So this has come at the worst time. Like, I don't know. This is another thing. I'm not too keen on watching it. I mean, I liked the first 3 parts, but let's just watch it on 2x.
In parallel, Christian wants to talk to Manfred to learn about the exploit. Manfred is looking at it. Maybe you can explain to me what you can install today. If you watch the previous video, you should be quite familiar with this fact. So can you understand and recognize some of the things Manfred is about to explain? But like, I honestly like kind of Matthew Bucks. This one, the structure is literally called math space. So it was like, so it's a launch check elimination. And yeah, and it's like basically an overflow bug, but I mean, the bug isn't the overflow can happen because it's about like additions that are supposed to be wrapping. It's supposed to be, but they are treated by this exactly as some. You can do it on like an integer definition, and it expects like, okay, this looks like a sum of this kind. So if you do like an expression like this, on top of these additions get truncated because of the OR gets like eliminated away, and you have like these unchecked wrapping additions. But because it still passes unknown to this math space thing, it just assumes okay, the second index is like 5 larger than the first one. So it extends the first bounce check by 5. And if you now have like a really large array, like 2 to the power 31 larger, then you can actually have like indices there that like the range goes above 2 to the power 31 and the range check passes, but the actual addition underflows to something negative. Okay, that makes sense. I hope this explanation was familiar to you from the last video. But more important, Freddy just got the files ready. Here he attached the exploit files to the bug tracker and announced it on Slack. POC attachment is up. So engineers offsite can also have a look at it. And Christian is surprised that this issue wasn't found through fuzzing because the basic building block looks like code that Fuzzer would generate. I wonder why fuzzing did not find this particular. Because I mean, it looks more complicated, but it doesn't look complicated enough for me to really say, like, I know why fuzzing wouldn't find this, right? I mean, maybe the large area, right? We have specific code for doing all of this because large areas have obviously a problem. And like one possibility is that if you just do this, it will still be inbounds. It will still be like differentially you could maybe find it. It will still return something and it should return undefined. But the problem is then like this int32 to int pointer. Just the logic that is okay if my only uses like the index, it's like you can't negative, it doesn't actually sign extension. And so then the speaking constructor also uses like the same extension, and but because all uses have to be like caught here, it wants it, but can be negative to false side. So yeah, they're only interesting for Christian to analyze why fuzzing didn't find it, and then maybe improve the fuzzer to catch something like this before it ends up in an exploit. But more important to Manfred and ZTI, the organizer of Control, is to know whether this is a known bug or not, because that will decide whether Manfred will get the prize money of $50,000. I'm fairly certain we can say already it's not because we already checked before. If we have any kind of shit bugs open, we usually don't. We don't like keeping these around. I mean, I guess it should be like a pretty easy fix because, in my opinion, like the correct thing is to just add like this infinite math space. But of course, I don't know like the performance side of things, if it's fix anything or something like that. By the way, there's one detail about the Firefox exploit and the Control competition that I haven't really mentioned yet. Browsers nowadays have a sandbox. This basically means websites rendering and JavaScript execution runs in a process that is locked down. For example, it's not allowed to read or write files or execute another program. But of course, if you want to download a file or even write cookies to this, you need to be able to access files. So this is done indirectly. The content process just tells the Firefox main process to do that for them. This means if you have an exploit here in the renderer, it doesn't give you full access to the system. Usually you need a second exploit to compromise the sandbox, which means in a full browser compromise, there are at least 2 vulnerabilities involved. But at Control, we've only always seen one exploit. And that's because both the exploit from Eduardo Tower as well as Manfred's exploits were renderer-only exploits. If you look into the detailed rules of Control, you can see here that for each browser, there are multiple options, and both entries have no sandbox escape and just targeted renderer-only. So in theory, they should be able to pop calculator. The sandbox will prevent them from executing a process. And that's why when you target renderer-only in the competition, Firefox gets started with the must disable content sandbox flag. This disables the sandbox and allows the exploit to launch the calculator. I just thought this is a small but important detail to mention for anybody not very familiar with browser exploits. It's really impressive to find such exploits, but there's still a weak spot. When you target renderer-only in the competition, Firefox gets started with the must disable content sandbox flag. This disables the sandbox and allows the exploit to launch the calculator. I just thought this is a small but important detail to mention for anybody not very familiar with browser exploits. It's really impressive to find such exploits, but there's still a lot of work to get the whole way full browser compromise. And that just shows that sandboxes are working. That really make it harder. And so for Mozilla, this is a very important line of defense. And in fact, they actually invested time to improve the sandbox over the year. And that's also why Mozilla wants to use this opportunity at Control to ask these security researchers about the sandbox whether it made it harder for them. I think we discussed this briefly before. before that you didn't try to look for a sample escape, or you? I mean, really shortly, but like it was not a lot of time, like especially with like the changes that I yesterday, it was like didn't think I had enough time for it. So you didn't try to find one? You didn't find one, or found something that was close to sample escape? I mean, I think I looked at it for like 1 or 2 days or so. But, yeah. So if you feel like you have something that would lead you somewhere, even if it's out of luck, is that interesting? I don't think I have anything. I have like one small thing that I like about separately, but not there. It's like a different thing. It's like I don't know, it's just like this. So we know there are some shortcomings in recent work we've done, but we still have to deploy it despite the major milestone. So if you would keep looking at something, specifically we do have a bounty, an exploit mitigation bounty that says if you can provide additional information, even if there isn't first package, even if you don't have first package, you can somehow mitigate it and bypass all mitigations in the entire process without killing cost. Or if you can just bypass the CSP without actually having an injection point, then we'll also proceed to maybe notice Christian is really focused and typing a lot. So what is he up to? Yeah, do something. I can actually reproduce in Shay. The proof of concept doesn't reproduce in the at the beginning. Yeah, at the beginning. What would be the symptom? Would it be crash? No, I should just I think it should probably Christian is using JS Shell, which is the JavaScript interpreter as a standalone process, not the whole browser, and he cannot reproduce the issue. On the screen for Freddy, you can see the trace of the crash in the browser. So obviously the exploit should work. So what's going on? How did you do spectrum mitigations off? Did you do spectrum mitigations? Yeah. And the test has spectrum mitigation 34 the browser doesn't. Yeah, no crash. Okay. With spectrum mitigation turned off, Christian was able to reproduce it in JS Shell, and we were also slowly wrapping up. On the way out, Christian and Freddy started talking German, and I overheard them mentioning the spectrum mitigations again. It turns out the browser itself runs without spectrum mitigations. So if JS Shell has it enabled by default and you couldn't reproduce the issue with it turned on, then maybe that's the explanation why fuzzy JS Shell didn't find it. But that's just my theory. Those are the things Christian will look into later. This time we didn't go back to the office and sat down right in the hotel lobby at the conference. By the way, it's also Saturday, but that doesn't matter much for Mozilla because they're using Code as a fire drill to practice when a real in-the-wild zero day gets discovered. So they are not waiting until Monday. Freddy, being the internet manager again, handles some of the organizational stuff like preparing the Mozilla advisory announcements, but then also spend some time looking into the exploit to better understand. At some point also Manfred joins us eating lunch and we talked a bit more about the bug, which was really great for Freddy and Christian because his insights are very, very valuable and appreciated. So what we also did is we looked at quick bug we found by other means, automated means that we use currently like fuzzing, for example. While this was not the case for yesterday's bug, today's bug looks a bit more promising in terms of we could find some fuzzing. We found out that the bug has been around for 4 years. So the question arises, why did no fuzzing tool find it, even though we have lots of fuzzing tools running on this? So there will be, in the aftermath, there will be a deeper investigation. Are there any kind of factors that prevent current fuzzing tools from finding this particular issue and potentially other issues? So this is the kind of procedure that we're going to investigate. How can we improve our tools to potentially cover this one as well? Any hunches? What might have been? Why did fuzzers get unlucky, or do you have an intuition for what maybe could be? I have an intuition right now. So we have multiple fuzzing tools. The test case is not super complicated, but it's also not super trivial. The tool that would be mostly suitable for this case would be Fusilli, because this is a digital optimization bug. Fusilli was actually written to target these kind of bugs. The problem is that in debug builds, this test case takes quite long to actually run. And this actually exceeds Fusilli's default runtime. In optimized builds, we get a crash much faster, but we actually don't have Fusilli running with purely optimized builds right now. We do have some other fuzzers running in the setup, but we mostly rely on debug builds because they often give us much more value in terms of insertions. And these are also not purely debug builds. We use debug optimized builds. They are usually very comparable in terms of performance. We still have to investigate why the debug optimized build is so much slower in this particular case. That I don't know, but this could play a role why Fusilli didn't have fun. Let's recap the timeline really quick. The exploit was shown on stage around 12 p.m. 20 minutes later, we got into the disclosure room, so around 12:30, the time started ticking for Mozilla to create the patch. Jan, the JavaScript engineer who fixed yesterday's issue, also mentioned that this bug looks quite old and seemed to go back around 4 years. Again, not even 1 hour later, Jan said that the fix would be very simple for now by scaling optimization. If we can collect some data and confirm that optimization is not very important for performance, that could be a good emergency. Shortly after, Jan put exactly this change. An early return in this linear sum function in this special world case. We've shared the write-up and the exploit with everyone involved. We have a patch up that's waiting for review. It already went through security review. We believe it's fine to land when it's the review version from JavaScript. We started writing security advisories for TBD, but I guess tomorrow, for new versions of Firefox 138.0.4 and the corresponding version numbers for extended release, which I don't know from the top of my head, was also ready to land. So I think we just really wait for the patches to be reviewed, to be built, and then QA to test the new builds before we actually contact new version of it. It seems like it's less of an issue than what we saw yesterday in terms of bringing up a reasonable patch that looks safe. It looks like there's an optimization that we can just try to remove for the time being with the value run. It seems to be a very low risk patch. We will still do some shadow fuzzing for the time that we have like QAs looking at it as well. But I think it should be much smoother than this where we have to do very analysis and look for some matches. Yes, I mean, Freddy already mentioned that patch is very, very small. It's an early return. It's an optimization. There's practically no impact on any other system except performance. And performance will make measure, of course. But for security fix, that's likely acceptable for now. And we can check out review about performance in the regular release cycle. Okay, it seems like they are going for this emergency fix now. But that's not all that has to be done for release. Here's the Mozilla wiki page about the release process. Under normal circumstances, the code committed in May leads to a Firefox 90 build every 12 hours.
Yeah. So ban is one thing. Address proof. passport. Pan is. Yeah, I need to work on that. I wish like Gmail had like a freaking a way to like link to emails, right? So, and a link that I could put somewhere and just, oh, maybe this is the link, right? Maybe that's the link. Oh, that is how it works. Well, that's great. I was like finding a place to share the fucking thing. Apparently, it's there. And then for zero, the fuck you. Yeah, so basically what I need is I need to do some shit for so some like money stuff. There's a ton of shit to do, honestly. I'm freaking tired. But I will do it. I have to do it. I mean, there was a time like I was bored of life and I was like, God, please give me like shit to do. Please make my life happening. I was so fucking bored. I had like so much time on my hands. And no, instead of like a balanced, evened out, like flow, routine, rhythm, it it has devolved into like I'm always like constrained. There's just so much shit to do always. Like literally, like these videos that I'm watching right now, this is the only fucking free time I have, like the entire motherfucking day. Um, Usually I don't even watch these. Like if I see a bunch of videos on the homepage or my subscriptions that are fun, I just open them up like while I'm having dinner. But yeah, the main thing is like, ugh, so much shit to do. Okay, let's just finish this fucking video.
Every 4 weeks, those changes get merged into beta, and if then beta turns out to be stable for 4 weeks and the final build is validated by quality assurance, we get a release. So it can take 4 to 8 weeks for regular patch to be pushed out as nothing. But an incident is different. Mozilla calls this a cancel. Cancel is a term used to describe a security-driven rapid release, but still, they must make sure to not break Firefox by pushing out a broken release. So incident process is at this point really just patches landed. So next step is review the patch, make sure that it lands in CI, runs through all of the tests. Then we have test builds which create the tests, and once all of that has happened, we'll ship the release for release. I'm thinking that will really be tomorrow. So completely independent of the of this release cycle, we actually discovered that since yesterday evening or yesterday night, there's an issue in synchronization of one of our repositories. This has nothing to do with security fixing the deploy. That's of course causing issues now in the release process. So people are working on fixing the synchronization so we can actually deploy the fixes to release. Right now, it's not a critical issue though because we are still waiting for review of the second patch, and as long as we don't have a review for the second patch, we can't plan anything. So we assume that this is working now on in parallel. It has been estimated that we will likely fix the repository issue before we actually get a review for the patch. Now that everything is going towards a release, the senior release manager at Mozilla also joins the discussion. And if you read these Slack messages, you can get a sense for that creating a new release is not trivial. But eventually, the patch will review, and we are one step closer to the release. At this point, both of the bugs have been fixed. We've handed over most of the tasks to release management and our folks in North America. I believe we've already gone through CI and configure all the testing. There will be a bit of manual testing and Q&A from our side. And I guess we could just call it sort of done from my perspective. And hoping we get to release late at night, my time, or early tomorrow. Yeah, and there was not much else we could make more. It was now around 7 p.m., and people in the US time zone took over. At home, I kept an eye on the Slack communications, and as somebody who has never really worked in software engineering, this was really interesting to observe, especially seeing this complexity behind the release and everything it affects when people are involved in support. And so let's have another look at the timeline. At 7 p.m., the release build got started. 90 builds with the patches were already available. His R build, the extended support builds also got started, and in parallel, there was extensive testing and QA. And then, just 30 minutes before midnight, the new version got released. A new Kensington security release, 138.0.4. Basically, this means for Manfred's exploits, it took Mozilla less than 12 hours from hearing about the 0 day to pushing out a release. I think that might be a new record. The year before, it was 21 hours that they got even recognized for. Here's the advisory with both exploits. Eduardo Chen and Tao Yang from Palo Alto Networks with out-of-bounds access and resolving promise objects, and Manfred Paul with out-of-bounds access and the linear sums optimization. Anyway, all that is left to do now is open Firefox, and there was. It's downloading the update, and then the famous button appears, restart to update Firefox. Wow, what a journey. I feel so privileged that I got this opportunity to be allowed into the disclosure room, so thanks so much, Steffi, for trusting me, and thank you, Freddie from Mozilla, who had this idea originally. I hope this one was interesting for you. I really love to hear about the blue from this entire series, so leave a comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and here are 2 last words by Freddie. So I think this has been interesting. Sometimes we're hiring resources about. We also have a blog, attackandDefense.dev, where we post internals for security researchers, hackers, and bug bounty hunters. And yeah, we have a bug program. I think we pay nicely for once we build the exploits. Come check it out. If you check that out on the platform, x3.io, it is true of AI and agents. You might think that you don't really need education anymore because the LLM can just hack the website for you. But even if I strongly believe that is the future, that is the case, I still think it's extremely important to have a knowledge foundation. Because only with a strong knowledge foundation and good understanding of technologies and all these different systems, you are able to actually prompt the LLMs and the agents effectively. And you will be able to realize when they make mistakes. So I still think it's very important to educate.
So, you want to learn how to talk to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and remove that damn awkward silence. First you need to understand the 3-question rule. Wait, come back. Before even thinking about going to talk to anyone else, you have to work on your mindset when approaching new conversations. So ask yourself these questions before you do so. What's the worst that will happen? Will I see this person ever again? Will I regret not doing this in a few hours? Now, what you'll realize is you're actually the worst enemy when it comes to starting a new conversation because you're approaching it in the complete wrong way. Take a conversation with the opposite sex, for example. It's so hard to do because you put them on a pedestal and try to talk to them like they're not human. Wow, you're beautiful. Wow. But this is because you're trying to get something out of the conversation for yourself, whether that's someone's number, take them on a date, or just simply get them to like you. So instead, scrap the idea of benefiting anything from this conversation and just connect with them like a human being. Because what you realize is if you have more in common with a human being than you do with a blonde girl that you might fancy and want their number. Let's be real. Number 2, understand that you are not socially anxious. You just haven't learned the skill of talking to new people, and that's okay, because that's what you're here. Number 3, conversations are like taps. You want to keep that tap flowing for as long as you need, otherwise you'll ruin the entire conversation. You at night, guess what the other person is about to say? Thanks. The convo's dead way too soon because you asked a closed question. So instead, ask open questions that don't allow that water to stop flowing. So how do you usually spend your weekends? You know, I like to, look at that conversation started. Number 4, use your surroundings as an advantage. When you're trying to talk to somebody at a wedding, a party, or just simply a walk, look around you, embrace your environment, and identify a couple talking points. See that hill over there? We say fine there. Come on. Conversation started. Number 5, be emotional. No, not like that. You have to cry, don't worry. Many people always tell you to make a conversation about the other person. Find things you have in common right away. But they're missing a huge part out. Emotion. Let me explain. You can have completely different jobs, hobbies, and still be great friends with someone. Because what matters more in conversations is connecting on an emotional level. So rather than questioning about boring, excuse me, what do you bench? Questions, or how much do you squat then? Ask them what made them start going to the gym in the first place. Or who their biggest inspirations were to begin their fitness journey. Even if you don't like fitness, these questions actually show you care about the person you're talking to and want to get to know them on a deeper level. And trust me, they'll understand that and feel that from you as well. Because people often forget names, conversations, or events, but they'll always remember how they felt around you. Number 6, finally change your perspective. Instead of thinking, what if they don't like me? Ask yourself, will I like them? This mindset shift has helped me so much in the job interview environment where I'm so used to being worried about them liking me that I forget that they also want you to like what they have to offer at the company. So thinking like this puts you in control, allowing you to be more curious rather than insecure. Because your opinion is just as important as everybody else's. So if ever you find yourself approaching someone new and you're afraid, just remember you're one conversation away from completely changing your life. Thank you very much. Have a good day. And start talking to new people.
You wrote the first ever TypeScript book with O'Reilly.
Yeah, I found that book translated in Japanese in this little town in Japan. That was just the coolest moment. And then I realized I don't remember TypeScript at all. Now we're at the point where Quad Code writes, I think, something like 80% of the code at Anthropic on average. I wrote maybe 10, 20 pull requests every day. Opus 4.5 and Quad Code wrote 100% of every single one. I didn't edit a single line manually.
Andrew Carpenter said that he's never felt as much behind as a programmer as he is now.
This is something I really struggle with. The model is improving so quickly that the ideas that worked with the old model might not work with the new model. One metaphor I have for this moment in time is the printing press in the 1400s, because there was a group of scribes that knew how to write.
Some of the kings were illiterate who were employing the scribes.
And if you think about what happened to the scribes, they ceased to become scribes, but now there's a category of writers and authors. These people now exist. And the reason they exist is because the market for literature has expanded a ton.
What happens when you join one of the top AI labs in the world and your first pull request gets rejected? Not because the code was bad, but because you wrote it by hand. This is exactly what happened to Boris Cherny when he joined Anthropic. Boris is the creator and engineering lead behind Claude Code. Before joining Anthropic, he spent 7 years at Meta, where he led code quality across Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Messenger, and was one of the most prolific code authors and code reviewers at the company. In today's episode, we cover how Claude Code went from a side project to one of the fastest growing developer tools, and the internal debate at Anthropic whether to release it at all. Boris's daily workflow of shipping 20-30 pull requests a day with zero handwritten code, and how code review works when AI writes everything. Why Boris believes we're living through a time as transformative as the printing press, and which engineering skills matter more now and which ones do not. If you want to understand how one of the people closest to AI coding agents actually builds software today, and what that means for the rest of us engineers, this episode is for you. This episode is presented by Statsig, the unified platform for clients, analytics, experiments, and more. Check out the show notes to learn more about them, and our team sponsors Sonar and WordPress. How did you get into tech software engineering and coding? It's first of all that, my sister passed across, so when I was 13 years ago this, I started selling my old cards on eBay, and I realized that I'm really passionate about HTML, and I was getting articles from cards and I realized I had big colors and fonts and stuff like this, and I started really fat. And I was going to, I sold my card, like 99 cents, 49 cents, or whatever, so everybody was going to have HTML, and everybody HTML. And then the second thing was this was also in middle school, we had this old EID3 round doctors, and we do math. And what I realized is, I can get better from math as programming answers, math as like so I kind of programs, these were answers and solvers and solvers and stuff like that, but I didn't know what something like that. And then I got organized like next year, and so I had to drop out from basic to just make a remote faster. So I did high school, you drop out to something. It's like middle school where I still didn't even first. And then the thing was, everyone in the class was realized that I solved everything else, so I also surveyed, so I needed that too. And then I thought that everyone was like, hey, this is really not. I was just realized it was like, you know, it must spend that. But for me, these are crap. So, you know, school basically announced, I got out to start startups, and I never thought that coding would be a career at all. It was really crap. Coding is means to build systems to do things. The first one was, I guess my friends were going to eat. As we started to reviews, we made a website called Confirm that sensory thinking, and then we just tried getting eat samples and like remove them. And that came up a lot. And then I was in, I don't know the testing stuff.
was also very small. And I wrote software, it was being about, and I remember this was back in like Index 466, what I was using. And I wrote SSD driver, because it was visual design. And we launched it, and then we had a chart for the user file, and put it up. And we're with Buffalo time. And as I'm very small, we're probably with Buffalo Louis stuff. And I remember, and so I remember saying, well, the stuff I shot for a place to see how I use this. And I realized that actually Docker's one behind to sit down and use it because you're using then you have independence of limitation. And in 10 minutes, you walk up all the way to it, you're taking it, open up, it's totally less easier. By the time it's out like 3 minutes, then you open up first for 6, and like 3 seconds, then you open up the second, how you sign it, and you're kind of dropping it. And so we grew everything from here, and it's not just, and then you realize Docker's walking around with a bunch of residents on them. In this situation, it's so stupid, right? The thing that matters is their scene has a party. They don't want to see on phones. And so I had to write basically Docker's in the user actually want to use, user actually have to this. But I love it. That's like very often kind of like this is like most fun thing to me is finding this part because it's always expecting. You can't have one big idea because I just run your so you can process you fall down and you just like also if I was listening to how you're telling this story because I feel get a lot of success stories here, success stories how went, but first of all, this is like you were I was all right. This is back before cloud engineering was the thing we're talking about, but just like we're right and you went there and shouted people and you understood how using it, right, not using it, think big ideas. I think this is what makes a great software engineer back then and then use it. Like you were this is the work on the outcome. Yeah, and well there's different messengers there's and you know right now engineering there's on and he's just incredible that line. He works on something anyway that and you know you do this kind of for me engineering has always been a practical thing. And you know always been interested in like design design or engineering or research or whatever. Because these are AI software engineering straightforward. As AI writes more code, more code needs to be verified. But there's a catch. AI generated code is on average harder to write deep analysis before. Why you create data before you ever had to see the AI. It's sort of like a bit of a website I started bidding on stuff. And my first paper I had to spend the entire thing on like it's hard. It was very practical, right? Because like when you're in this kind of stuff, you have to do engineering, you have to do kind of accounting, you have to do the design, you have to talk to the customers. It's just always been like that. After a couple of startups, you learned about Facebook and I'll talk that up. And there, you spent 7 years there. Can you just talk us through what you worked there, what you've learned there? You've also had a very remarkable career growth in terms of 4 promotions over 7 years. And what do you take away from that experience? Yeah, so I started on Facebook groups. That was the bunch of JavaScript stuff, and it's funny, like I got across. But anyway, so I was working on Facebook groups. I was really excited about it because of this mission of connecting people to their community. This is the thing that drew me in. And at the time, I was a big Reddit user. I became a Reddit user back when I was a teenager because I didn't know anyone else that coded. Even in college, I didn't really know anyone that coded. And honestly, I was always kind of embarrassed about it because I thought it was this nerdy thing. And I thought.
Where the fuck did the sound go? Oh.
People that are into this thing, it's like such a weird hobby, it's so niche. And it was just so exciting to find like-minded people like this and get this connection. And so I just wanted to work on this. I wanted to kind of contribute to this in some way. So I worked on Facebook groups for a while. And then, you know, there's a bunch of different projects to kind of get into details for any of these. Eventually I became the tech lead for Facebook groups. Kind of grew into this, and the work grew, the work really changed. It changed from kind of building to more like doc writing and coordination and kind of delegating to other corners were cut in order to grow. But at some point you just have to pay that debt. And that was the time when that happened. Then I spent a few years at Instagram after. And that was also a funny story. My wife got a job offer, and she was just really excited about it. And she came to me and was like, "Hey, like I got this offer, but we're gonna have to move. Is that okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine. You know, like at Work in Tech, we can work remotely anywhere. Where's the job?" And she was like, "It's in Nara." I was like, "Where's that?" And Nara's like rural Japan, and this was
different time zone as well.
Different time zone, yeah. This was
12 hours or something difference or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. It was like 2021. And then I tried to kind of find a team that would sponsor me because there were these kind of arcane HR rules about like the time zone you have to be in and the team you have to be co-located with and so on. And so there was a little kind of nascent team for Instagram in Tokyo. And Will Bailey was running this team. He was also the guy that made Instagram stories. And so he was my manager for a while. And so we decided to grow that team together. And I worked remotely from Nara, and then most of the team was in Tokyo. And during this time, I started hacking on Instagram, and the stack was just insane. Like Facebook was the single best web serving stack in the world. The way that everything's optimized, like from the hack language to the HHVM runtime to the GraphQL as a transport layer to like the client libraries like Relay and all this stuff. It was just and React. It was just amazing. There's no other dev stack in the world that was this good, and it is just fully optimized. And then I went to Instagram, and it's like, you know, Python where the type checker didn't work, click to definition didn't work, and it was this like kind of hack together Django, and then like a fork of the Python runtime, and just nothing really worked. And so I came to Instagram. I joined the labs team, in Japan. And the idea was to find the next big thing for Instagram. We tried some stuff, but what I very quickly realized is that I was just not effective at working on the stack because it was such a terrible stack. And so I just went and started working on dev infra because we needed to fix it. And there's a few projects that we worked on. So one was migrating from Python to the big Facebook monolith. Another one was migrating from REST to GraphQL. And these projects, they're actually in progress. You know, like these are things that involve, it takes hundreds of engineers many years to do this. It's a big code base, it's a big migration. Now it's much faster.
Yeah, with these tools that we have, the AI tools, and migrations are a pretty good use case for them, though.
Yeah, it's the perfect use case for it. And then I just started getting kind of deeper into this. And by the time I left Instagram, so I was working on this on Dev Infra and kind of leading a bunch of these migrations. So that's also where I intersected with Fiona Fung, who is now the manager for the Quad Code team. I just worked with her, and she was just such an amazing leader, this incredible depth and kind of history in tech. And I just felt like there's no better manager for this team. And then I also started working on code quality. And so the work on Instagram kind of expanded a bit. And by the time I left, I was leading code quality for all of Meta. And so I was responsible for the quality of the code bases across Instagram, Facebook, Messenger, WhatsApp, Reality Labs, kind of all these code bases.
I mean, It's a long freaking interview. I'm gonna go do some shit. It might take me 5-10 minutes, and I'll be back, and we'll see whether we want to continue with the interview or if we just want to start working. So yeah, let's see. Oh, fuck. I said I would be like 10 minutes, but it was more like fucking almost 20 minutes. I didn't fucking know that's how long I usually take in my nighttime routine. But yeah, I mean, I didn't even like do it fully. So that's insane. That's fucking insane. I hate it. Yeah. It sucks. Do you want to get the interview over with and only then move on to more interesting stuff, or is it something else that we want to do? Okay, let's just watch the freaking interview. I like to close threads.
At Meta, it was a program called Better Engineering. And the idea was, I think it started like 2016 or 2018 or something. But Zuck mandated that every engineer at the company, 20% of their time has to be spent fixing tech debt. Oh, interesting. And we call this Better Engineering. And some of this is kind of bottom up, where a team knows best the tech debt that they have to fix, and then some of it is top down, where you need to do very big migrations, you need to migrate to language features and frameworks, things like this. And at Facebook scale, there was tens of thousands of these migrations every year. And so I just started leading all this, and I realized very quick that it just needed a little bit more order to it. There was no goals, no one knew kind of like what the outcomes were, there wasn't any tracking. And so we developed a bunch of stuff. One of the ideas was a centralized way to prioritize the different kind of code quality efforts. The second thing was figuring out the impact of code quality on engineering productivity, which turned out to be significant.
How did you measure? What did you find there?
There was a bunch of stuff. I think some of this has been published. I don't know if all of it has, but essentially you try to do like causal analysis and causal inference. This is the methodology. You try to figure out like what are the factors that make us engineers more productive. Some of it is code quality, some of it is outside of code quality. So for example, Meta went back to return to office instead of work from home. That was partially driven by us because we just found some fairly strong correlations that we thought were causal. About this. But code quality actually contributes like double-digit percent to productivity. It turns out even after the skill.
It's kind of comforting to hear because I think it's rare to have a place where you actually measure this. I think we feel it like when you have a clean code base and modular, or it can get easier to work with. And I think reasoning could also be easier for LLMs to work with it. And my hint would be yes, it should be right. But I think there's just very little data. But that's a feeling that I would have.
Yeah, I think a lot of the big companies have published about this. Like, I think Facebook published something, Microsoft publishes a bunch about this, Google does. But yeah, totally. If every time that you build a feature, you have to think about, do I use framework X or Y or Z? These are all options that you can consider because the code base is in a partially migrated state where all of these are around the code somewhere. As an engineer, you're going to have a bad time. As a new hire, you're going to have a bad time. As a model, you might just pick the wrong thing. And then, the user has to work correctly. So actually, the better thing to do is just always have, a clean code base. Always make sure that when you start migration, you finish the migration. And this is great for engineers, and nowadays it's great for models too.
And then you joined Anthropic. And I've heard the story, which you can confirm or get more color to it, that your first pull request was rejected by Adam Wolf.
He was my grandpa buddy. So I joined Anthropic. I was trying to figure out kind of like what to do next. And, I met a bunch of people at all the different labs, and Anthropic was just the obvious choice for me because of the mission. This is the thing that personally I know that I need the most. And also just kind of seeing all this change that's happening, it's important to have some sort of framework to think about this and to think about our role in it. I'm also a really big sci-fi reader. Like, that's definitely my genre. I'm a big reader. I have giant bookshelf at home and stuff. And I just know how fast it can go. And I just felt like this is a place that has serious thinkers. People are taking this very seriously and thinking about what can we do to make this thing go better. So when I joined Anthropic, I did a bunch of ramp-up practice, just various stuff that I was hacking on. And I wrote my first pull requests by hand because I thought that's how you write code.
That used to be how you write code.
That used to be how you write code. But even at the time at Anthropic, there was this thing called Clyde, and it was a predecessor to Quad Code. It was super janky. It was Python, it took like 40 seconds to start up. It was research code. It was not agentic. But if you prompt it very carefully and hold the tool just right, it can write code for you. And so Adam rejected my PR, and he was like, actually, you should use this Clyde thing for it instead. And I was like, okay, cool. It took me like half a day to figure out how to use this tool because you have to pass in a bunch of flags and use it correctly. But then it sped out a working PR. It just one-shotted it.
Oh.
And this was like 2024, like September 2024 rockets, something like that. And I think for me, this was my first field AGI moment at Anthropic because I was just, oh my God, like, I didn't know the model could do this. Like I was used to these like kind of top completions, line level completions in IDE. I had no idea that I could just make a working pull request for me.
Morris just talked about how he had a true wow moment at work using their AI model. A very different wow moment is when you use a tool at work that makes things so much easier than before. And this leads us nicely to our presenting sponsor, Statsig. Statsig offers engineering teams a tool for experimentation and feature flying that used to require years of internal work to build. It's the kind of tool that was so complex to build that only large companies like Meta or Uber had their own custom advanced tooling for it. Here's what Statsig looks like in practice. You ship a change being on a feature gate and roll it out gradually, say to 1% or 10% of users at first. You watch what happens. Not just did it crash, but what did it do to the metrics you care about? Conversion, retention, error rates, latency. If something looks off, you turn it off quickly. If it's trending the right way, you keep it rolling forward. And the key is that measurement is part of the workflow.
Why am I watching ads? And why does, I mean, okay, I'm not hating on somebody getting the bag.
And then when you join Anthropic,
But his ads are kind of annoying because, first of all, he doesn't put them in timestamps and they're so short and they're so often. I mean, bruh, just put them at the end of sections or something. That's how people do it. And make them longer. Like, people who want to watch will watch it for a long time, and those who don't want to watch, they won't.
we covered this in the deep dive, but we could recap briefly on how Cloud Code came to be out of what seemed like a side project or just a cool hack.
So yeah, I started hacking on a bunch of different stuff. I was working on something like products. I worked on reinforcement learning for a little bit just to kind of understand the layer under the layer of which I was building. This is still advice that I give to a lot of engineers: is always understand the layer under. It's really important because that just gives you the depth, and you kind of like you have a little bit more levers to work at the layer that you actually work out. This was advice 10 years ago. It's still advice today, but the layer under is a little bit different now. You know, before it was like understand, the Java, if you're writing JavaScript, understand the JavaScript beyond the frameworks and stuff.
Yeah.
Now it's like understand the model. So I was hacking on a bunch of different stuff. Some things shipped, some things didn't ship. And at some point, I just wanted to understand the public Anthropic API because I'd never used it before. And I didn't want to build a UI. I just wanted to, hack something up quite quickly because we didn't have Cloud Code back then. We're still writing code by hand. And I wrote this little bash tool that all it did was it hit the Anthropic API. And it was essentially like a chat-based application that just in the terminal. Because that's what AI used to be. And, I still think about it like engineers are the first adopters. And so when we started to move out of conversational AI to agentic AI, it took a little bit, but engineers understood it pretty quick. And I think now when you ask non-engineers about like, what is AI, they would say it's this conversational AI. It's like a chatbot or something. And that's why I'm actually very excited for, Cowork, this new product that we launched, because it's going to bring the same thing that engineers saw very early to everyone else. But when I think about, Cowork, I think back to this moment that we're talking about, like very early on. Cloud Code originally wasn't Cloud Code, it was a chatbot, because that's what I thought AI was. But we had to kind of figure out kind of what is the next thing. And so at the time, I built this chatbot. It was somewhat useful, but it was just a chatbot. And the next thing that I tried was I wanted it to use tools, because tools just came out, and I didn't know what it was. And I was like, let's experiment. and I gave it a simple tool, which was the bash tool. And I didn't know what to do with the bash tool, and so I asked it, I actually didn't know if it could even do this, but I asked it, what music am I listening to? And it wrote a little Apple script program using like SED or whatever to open up my music player and then like query it to see what music it's listening to. And just one-shot this with Sonnet 3.5. This is actually my second field AGI moment, very quickly after the first one. And the model just wants to use tools. That's just what I realized. Like this thing, like if you give it a tool, it will figure out how to use it to get the thing done. And I think at the time, when I think about the way that people were approaching AI and coding, everyone essentially had this mental model. You take the model and you put it in a box, and you figure out like what is the interface like? How do you want to interact with this model? What do you need it to do? Essentially, it's like if you have a program, you start out some module, start out some function, and you say, okay, this is now AI, but otherwise the rest of the program is just a program. And so this is just not the way to think about the model. The way to think about it is the model is its own thing. You give it tools. You give it programs that it can run. You let it run programs. You let it write programs. But you don't make it a component of this larger system in this way. And I think there's just like, this is a version of the bitter lesson. The bitter lesson is a very specific framing, but there's many corollaries to it. This is one of the corollaries, is just let the model do its thing. Don't try to put it in a box. Don't try to force it to behave a particular way.
One of the first ways you saw it was giving it tools, giving access to the bash, and then later to the file system, and then to more tools, right?
That's right. Yeah, we give it bash, then it was just me the first 3 months, but then the team grew. So it was bash, it was and file it. That was the second one.
And one of the interesting things we talked about last time for the deep dive is when you built it and it started to actually write code with the level tools that you've had an internal debate inside Anthropic. Should we just keep it to ourselves? Because suddenly it spread across engineering and it was making all of you a lot more productive, right?
Yeah, that's right. In the end, the decision was to release so that we can study safety in the wild. Because when you think about safety, and I keep talking about the word safety, the reason Anthropic exists as a lab is safety. This is the reason it was founded, this is the reason it exists. If you ask anyone at Anthropic why they chose it, it's because of safety. And so if you think about model safety, there's different layers at which to think about it. There's kind of alignment and mechanistic interpretability. This is at the model layer. Then there's evals, and this is kind of like putting the model in a petri dish and synthetically studying it in this way. And then you can study it in the wild, and you can see how it actually behaves. You can see how users talk about it. You can see like what are the risks in the wild, and you actually learn a lot this way. And by doing this, we've been able to make the model much safer. So in hindsight, it was totally the right decision.
It's amusing to hear about it from your perspective, because from the outside, what I saw, what a lot of engineers saw, is like, oh, Anthropic released Cloud Code. Oh wow, this, for the first release with I believe it was with Sonnet 4 at least. Did it come out with so much more original? There's so much 4.5.
I think it was for that was the general availability in February. I think it was research preview for it.
Yeah, but when it came out, my interpretation was like, oh, this thing can write code pretty well, and over time it became a lot more capable. So from our perspective, it was like this really capable coding tool that we just started to adopt and use for all sorts of increasingly productive art. And it has become, I believe, one of the fastest growing developer tools. And I'm always surprised to hear the story that it actually comes from research and the goal to understand how people use the model. Because on the other hand, like some startups have been trying to build developer tools deliberately to get adoption, and yet this research tool is getting a lot more adoption.
I mean, this is a Anthropic, we're a research lab, we're a safety lab, and product is this kind of thing tacked onto the side. Product exists so that we can serve research better, and so we can make the model safer. And this is kind of how we think about everything. There's also this funny moment early on when we had this launch review, and we were deciding whether to launch it. I remember this moment because we were in the room. I think there was Mike Krieger, there was Dario, there was some other folks, and we were deciding what should we do. We were looking at the internal adoption chart, which was just vertical. It was just insane. It was like nowadays
it was 100%, right?
Just 100%. Like nowadays, every technical employee at Anthropic uses Claude Code every day is pretty much 100%. For non-technical employees, it's also like it's actually getting quite close to 100%. It's increasing very quickly. Like like half the sales team uses Claude Code, and I think that's increasing. It's crazy. Dario had this question about like how did it grow this fast? Are you like forcing people to use it? And I was like, no. We offer this tool. People vote with their feet, and just like let people use the tool that they prefer.
Yeah, you don't seem like the person who's exactly forcing people to use your tool.
Yeah. I mean, the way we did it, we watched the thing, and then we just like listened to the users, and we talked to people. We saw how to use it. We followed up. We made it better. And now we're at the point where Claude Code writes, I think, something like 80% of the code at Anthropic on average, and it writes all my code for sure.
Yeah, and this started for you. It started the first time you mentioned. I think it was in November when it started to write all of your code. When did that switch come? And what happened to make you trust it to write your code? Or how would you trust it? How would you review that code yourself?
So the switch was instant when we started using Opus 4.5. This was before it came out. We were operating it for a little bit, and it was just right away. It's such a more capable model. I just found that I didn't have to open my IDE anymore. I just uninstalled my IDE because I just didn't need it at that point. I actually did that like a month later because I just didn't even realize that I wasn't using it anymore.
Yeah, a lot of us had similar experiences once Opus 4.5 was out in public, and especially over the winter break. I had a similar experience. I just realized that this thing, it actually writes, if I'm being honest with myself, as good code as I would have written in the stack that I'm very familiar with, and my code base, my side projects where I know it, and just a lot better than what I could for code base that I'm not familiar with, technologies I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I'll be honest, it writes better code than I do.
I don't want to go there. I still like to keep my pride, but probably true.
Yeah. I realized this because also in December I was traveling a little bit. I was on a coding vacation. We were talking about this before, but I went to Europe. We were just in a different time zone, kind of nomading around, and it was so fun because I was just coding all day, every day. It was just my favorite thing to do. And I wrote maybe like 10, 20 pull requests every day, something like that. Opus 4.5 and Claude Code wrote 100% of every single one. I didn't edit a single line manually, and I realized at the end of that month, Opus introduced me to $2. Whereas if I'd written that by hand, that would have been like $20 or something like that.
Can we talk about your development workflow? You have written threads about this, which is awesome. It's on social media, on Threads, and on X. But can you tell us how you use today Claude Code in terms of parallelism and tips and tricks that you and the team have kind of learned and share across the team?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no one right way to use Claude Code, so I can share some tips and things, but I think the wrong conclusion to draw would be to just copy these and use it. The way we build Claude Code is we build it to be hackable because we know every engineer's workflow is different. There's no one way to do things. There's no two engineers that have the same workflow. It's just every engineer is the
same workstation setup, right? Like keyboards, monitor placement, all that runs differently.
Yeah, it's like we're in craftspeople, right? Like you use your tools. So there's no one right way to do it. So for me, the way that I do it generally is I have 5 terminal tabs. Each one of them has a checkout of the repository. So it's 5 parallel checkouts. And usually I'll kind of round robin and start Claude Code in each one. Almost every time I start in plain mode, so that's like shift tab twice in the terminal. And I also overflow as I run out of tabs because there's only so many terminal tabs. I used to use web a lot for this, like Claude.ai/code. That's the place that I overflow to. Nowadays I actually use the desktop app. It's more convenient. So Claude Code, it's been in our desktop app for many months. It's just a code tab in the Claude app. And I actually really like it because it has built-in work support. So that's existed for a while. And that's quite nice for parallelism. So you don't need multiple checkouts. You just have one, and then we automatically set Git work trees for you. So you get this kind of environment isolation. The reason I do that is I actually just really hate fiddling with Git work trees on the command line because it's kind of fiddly. Like you need to know the CD.
Git work tree, for those who are not as familiar with it, it's when you can check out, instead of having a separate global folder, it's almost like checks out a separate branch, right? And then you can work on it separately, but not have the context of the like merge time.
That's right. Imagine that you have a folder, but you have maybe like Git makes 5 copies of that folder in a way that's very cheap and kind of easy to throw away. So you get this kind of isolation. You can work on parallel and the Claude don't interfere.
Yeah, so you now have support for this, which I think recently added like native support, but like for your workflow, you just stuck with the old one of checking out on separate folders, right?
Yeah, exactly. I actually find that over time I'm using the desktop app more and more for this, just because I don't need these separate checkouts, and I just have a bunch of Claude running in parallel and I don't have to think about it. The other surprise hit is the iOS app for me. Every day I wake up and I start a few agents on my phone.
Oh, the native one, yeah.
The new one, yeah. It's just like it's the Claude app, it's the code tab in the Claude app, and it's the same exact Claude code.
Yeah, except it runs in the cloud, right?
It runs in the cloud. Yeah, so you have to kind of configure the environment. But our environment's pretty simple, so and then we just use hooks for it. So you just use the session start hook and configure it. This is kind of one of the benefits of making Claude Code really hackable. It's very easy to do this kind of configuration. And this is something honestly I would never have predicted, because I code on a computer, if you told me 6 months ago I'd be writing, I don't know, a third, I haven't pulled the data, maybe like a third path, something like this of my code on a phone, that's crazy. But that's what I'm doing today.
And you're using parallel agents. At what point did you start using them, and how has it changed your work? Because one thing that I noticed on myself, I don't really use that many parallel agents. I maybe like 2 at a time, but I'm someone who, well, I like to be in charge, and especially with Claude. Claude is a tool that you can follow it along. It tells you what it's doing. You can also have, for example, learn mode, which this was shipped a lot earlier, where you can actually follow along. It gives you tasks. I feel that like staying in one tab and following along the model is pretty fast as well. I can kind of keep in touch. I'm assuming at some point you must have done this, but then what happened when you changed to parallel, and or do you feel you're losing any control, or it doesn't really matter that much?
Yeah, I think there's kind of like 2 modes to think about, or kind of like two kind of workflows to think about. So when you're new to a code base, learn mode is awesome. Highly recommend it. For people that are onboarding to the Quadcode team, people that onboard to Anthropic, the thing that we recommend is, so you do, for people that haven't tried it, you do /config in Quadcode, you pick the output style, and you can do learn or explanatory. We usually recommend explanatory because that tends to be better for new code bases that you kind of haven't been in before. For me, once you're familiar with the code base, you just want to be productive, right? Like you just want to ship as much as you can, and you want to kind of be effective doing that. So the role really switches. I don't really go deep into tasks anymore. I start a quad in play mode. I'll have it kick something off. With Opus 4.5, I think it got there. With 4.6, it just really, really does it. Once there's a good plan, it will one-shot implementation almost every time. So the most important thing is to go back and forth a little bit to get the plan right. So what I do is I start one, I enter.
Cloud work in terms of architecture. So as an engineer, how can I imagine it's set up? It's we covered some of this in the deep dive, and I think you told me that you had some pretty complex ideas when you started, and you just simplified a lot of it.
Yeah, it's very simple. Like there's not much to it. There's a core query loop. There's a few tools that it uses. We delete these tools all the time. We add new tools all the time. We're just always experimenting with it. So there's kind of this core kind of agent part of it. Then there's the 2E part of it, and then there's actually a ton of different pieces around security and making sure that everything that Quadcode does is safe and that runs.
By safety, do you mean as a user when it's doing stuff on my computer, or also as Anthropic monitoring use cases that could be deemed unsafe?
Yeah, there's kind of a couple versions of this. Safety, there's just many layers, and for things like safety and security, there's no one perfect answer. So it's always a switch piece model. You just need a bunch of layers, and with enough layers, the probability of catching anything goes up. And so you just have to kind of count the number of times in that probability and pick the threshold that you want. And so for something like prompt injection, for example, we do this generally at 3 different layers. So let's think about something like web fetch. So Quad fetches a URL, and it reads the contents of that web page, and then it does something in Quadcode. So one of the risks for something like this is prompt injection. Maybe there's an instruction on that website to be like, hey, Quad, delete all the folders or something like that. So we think about this in a number of ways. The most basic way is it's an alignment problem. And so Opus 4.6 is the most aligned model we've ever released because we've taught the model how to be more resistant to prompt injection. And so you can read about this on the model card, and I think it was part of the release. The second part is that we have classifiers at runtime, where if there is a request that seems to be prompt injected, we block it. And we just make the model try again. And then the third layer is, for something like web fetch, we actually summarize the results in using a sub-agent, and then we return that summary back to the main agent. So again, this kind of reduces the probability of prompt injection. And so you can kind of see how this isn't just one mechanism, it's a layer. And
this is actually, it just gave me an idea that working on alignment, I mean, not like alignment, but like, working on making your models more resistant to prompt injection could definitely be a good project idea. So yeah. How do I put it there? Project. Sorry, I'm just organizing my shit because I want to note this down as something I can do. I mean, yeah, I can put it in the same shit, right? This would go into bots. A lot of shit in bots to be done. Yeah, there's a lot of shit that I need to clean up as well. I think there's nothing here. Maybe. I mean, yeah, I'm still like in the ideas thing, you know. That's the ideas freaking phase is what I'm still in right now. Kinda. LORs. Doo-doo. Tips. GitHub. Yeah, I have OCD of some sort. Yeah. So we essentially have study the criteria. So these things I'm not gonna do right now at the moment. Right now the focus is on like what am I gonna build, right? So we have tips. One of the tips is you can, yeah, there's a bunch of tips. Then you can work on desired job postings. So look at the kind of jobs you might want and see what kind of projects would make you an attractive candidate. And then of course there's actual project ideas here as well. But yeah, I got a good idea from this guy while he was talking about prompt injection or something that yeah, I can work on that.
Having a bunch of these different layers, it just reduces the probability a lot. One interesting technical choice.
AI security, basically. Yeah, AI security is a AI security isn't a bad idea. Now that I think about it. And it's also kind of related to what you, I mean, it's not related to what I do entirely, but kinda.
You also mentioned this is using RAG or not, RAG retrieval augmented generation. And you mentioned how the earlier version of Cloud Code, you use a local vector database to get some, to speed up search, and you layer through this away. Can you talk about how this one, because this is another example where I guess did the model get better?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where we try so many different things. We try so many different tools, and just statistically, most of them we throw away. Even something like the spinner in Quad Code, I think it's gone through like 100 iterations. I want to say, just the spinner. And out of those, we landed maybe like 10 or 20 in production, and like 80 of them I probably just threw away because it didn't feel good enough. So just statistically, almost all the code we write, we throw away because it's just so easy to write this code and try stuff and see what feels good. So for something like RAG, we tried a bunch of different approaches early on. So the first one was RAG for retrieval, because I think that was just like reading up like how people were doing retrieval, and it seemed like all the papers were talking about RAG. And so the way I did it was like a local vector database. It was like written in TypeScript, and you just looked on the user machine. And then I was using some like embedding model that was in the cloud to compute the embeddings before storing it. And that worked pretty good. But there's a lot of issues with RAG. So for example, I was finding that the code drifted out of sync. Like if I make a local function, it's not yet indexed, and so RAG isn't going to find it. There's also this question of like how exactly is the index permissioned? So who can access it? I can access it, but then how do we like encode that in kind of permission policies? How do we make sure no one else can access it? How do we make sure that like if there's a rogue IT person within the company, they can't access someone else's data? This is really, really important that we think about this.
Yeah.
And so we just decided like it was sort of working, but it also has a lot of downsides. And so we tried a bunch of other stuff. One of them was just using the model to kind of index everything recursively. That was kind of a cool idea. There's another version where we just tried glob and grep. We tried a bunch of different stuff. It turned out that agentic search just outperformed everything. And when I say agentic search, it's a fancy word for glob and grep. That's all it is.
Nice. So the model both got good enough, and you realize that it can use these tools pretty efficiently.
Yeah, and this was it was partially inspired honestly by my experience at Instagram, because at Instagram, click to definition didn't work because the dev stack was just borked like half the time, and I think now it's better. And so what engineers learned to do instead is, let's say you're looking for the definition of the function foo. Instead of click to definition, what you would do is you would use the global index, which is quite good at meta, and then you would search for foo for opening parenthesis, and this worked pretty well. And it's funny because like this works for the model pretty well too.
Interesting how one idea from one area can come to the other. One of the more advanced parts of Cloud Code that we also previously talked about is the permission system. Can you talk about what was complex about it? And also, you used the open source sandboxing, right?
Should I try Cloud Code? I mean, to try Cloud Code, I will need I will need the subscription, right? So aren't these like two completely different things? Yeah, I don't know. Like I think like things are moving. I don't want to be the person who says that, but yeah, I do think things are moving kind of fast. So yeah, you don't know. Like I think if you really want something that's kind of long lasting, you'd probably need to work directly with the models, right? Instead of thinking in terms of these like layers which make them agentic or whatever. You actually want to work with the base model. I don't know.
Permissioning is really complex. There's like everything else that has to do with security. It's a Swiss cheese model. There are a number of classifiers that run to make sure the command is safe. And there's also static analysis that we do to make sure the command is safe. As a user, you can also allow lists particular patterns that you know to be safe. So for example, some standard Unix utilities we pre-allow because we know they're read-only, because we know they can't exfiltrate data or anything like this. So we just won't prompt you for permission. But actually quite few tools fall into this category because even something like the find command, there's actually a way to execute arbitrary code as part of that command because there's like system flags they can use for this. Or even something like the set command, there's ways to use this. So there's just like all this like arcania about these various Unix utilities where it's actually not as safe as you think. And so we want to be by default very conservative about what we allow by default. As a user though, you can configure an allowance. So you can say, for example, like these patterns are allowed, these patterns are not allowed. And so we let you define that and we also check this allowance to make sure that it's safe.
Yeah, and then you have this like neat permission system where every time, I want to ask you about how software engineering is done in general in terms of Anthropic. And one of the first questions, which is I guess a more formal one, or from the outside, is titles or lack of them. Everyone at Anthropic has the same title member of technical staff. Why did this happen, and what does this result in? This kind of like everyone, basically no titles, right, except for one.
I think it's kind of an acknowledgement that everyone just is figuring stuff out. And, if you kind of squint and look at the work people are doing, it's all quite similar and it's kind of quite generalist. And if you talk to the average software engineer, they might not just be doing coding, they might also be doing a little design. They might also be talking to users. They might be writing their own product requirements. They might be writing software and also doing research. They might be writing product code and also infrastructure code. At Anthropic, there's a lot of general models. Let's talk about Cloud Cowork. It's one of the very representative things about it. It looks great, so I tried it out. It's inside Cloud, you have the Cowork that's out there, and then you can. I feel it's a lot more visual way of running agents, interacting with them. One of the surprising things I heard that it was built in 10 days. Can you take us through like what it took to build it and what does that actually mean? Was it from the idea or like from the decision of building it, and how big was the team building it? The team was really small. It was just a few people. For a long time, we felt that there is some product to be built for non-engineers. The reason we felt this is for a long time, people that were using Cloud Code are non-engineers. And so, in the product world, when you see latent demand, you see people jumping through hoops to use a product that was not designed for them. That's a really good sign it's time to build another product that is built just for them. There's all these people on Twitter that there's this one guy that was using Cloud Code to like monitor his tomato plants. I thought this. It was like, get like a webcam set up, and Claude was like, oh my god, I'm so happy that our plant is budding. And because it had like webcam and just like every day was like monitoring it, and it was so happy that the tomatoes were growing. There was someone that was using Claude Code to recover photos off of a corrupted hard drive, and it was like his wedding photos. Like I said, our entire finance team at Anthropic uses Claude Code. Our sales team uses Claude Code. So there's just all these people that are non-engineers that were using it. And at that point, Claude Code is available in a lot of form factors, right? Like we started in a terminal, then we expanded and we added support for IDEs. So we have extensions for every VS Code-based IDE, every JetBrains based IDE. There's also iOS and Android apps. There's the desktop app. There's web. So then there's like Slack and GitHub apps. So we can expand it to all these places to make Cloud Code easier for engineers. But ultimately, none of these are built still for non-engineers. And so Cloud Code evolved a lot, but it still felt like there's kind of a gap, and there's a product that could make this even easier for people. And so for the last couple of months, the team was kind of hacking around and just seeing like what is the right product. And at some point, someone came up with this idea of like, what if we just take Cloud and support everything?
One thing you mentioned is just getting feedback. I'm curious, both for Cloud Code and for Cloud Cowork, how do you go about things like observability, monitoring, when you're rolling out? Do you use any feature flags? And I'm more interested in like, did you build custom tools for this, or did you decide to use certain vendors? Because especially for observability, I'm sure that this is both important, but it also sounds like pretty high scale in terms of the number of users that we can derive, or this will not be a small operation.
Yeah, there's some off-the-shelf vendors that we use. There's some custom code that we use. So it's a mix of both. There's nothing too surprising about it. There's one thing about Anthropic that's kind of interesting is because we're an enterprise company and we care a lot about privacy and security, we can't see people's data. And so, like if someone reports a bug, like I actually can't pull up your logs to kind of see what's going on. A lot of work goes into kind of figuring out how to log events and things like this in a privacy preserving way. This is just very important to the way that we operate.
For Cowork, what kind of learnings have you had so far? It's been out for I think a few weeks now. Did you see something unexpected? Or you just very recently, it was I think yesterday or the day before when we're recording this podcast, was agent teams. As I understand the idea with what agent teams, agents forms, instead of a single agent, you can have a lead agent that can delegate to before being a software engineer that are still as valuable or maybe even more valuable than before, and what are ones that are maybe just not as much and they're best left behind?
Probably okay. So the stuff that's left behind is maybe like very strong opinions about like code style and languages and things like this. Like I can't wait to get past like these endless language debates and framework debates and all this stuff, because the model can just use whatever language and framework, and if you don't like it, it can just rewrite it for you. so this doesn't matter anymore. I think something that still matters a lot today is it's being methodical and hypothesis driven. This matters both in product design in this world where everything is being disrupted and we need to figure out what to build next, and this is something everyone's thinking about. But it also matters for engineering day to day, something like debugging. You just have to be very methodical about it. And the model can do this, and it can help a lot. But I think still we're in this transition point where you still need to have the skill. I don't know if you're still going to need to have it in 6 months. Other skills that I think are more valuable are being curious and being open to doing things beyond your swim lane. So, if you're working on engineering, but you really understand the business side, you can just build really awesome products. And I think the next, $1 billion product, like after Quad Code, whatever the next startup is that, becomes the next $1 trillion startup, it might just be like one person that has some cool idea and their brain just is able to think across, engineering and product and business, or, like design and finance and something else. Like people are going to become more and more multidisciplinary, and this will become more and more rewarded. So in some ways, I think this will be the year of the generalist. I think the other skill that's actually been rewarded a bit is having a short attention span.
That's being rewarded now.
Oh yeah, it's like teenagers are using like TikTok and all this stuff, and I think in some ways it's kind of dangerous for society because you want people that can think deeply and can contemplate ideas and aren't just moving on to the next idea very quick. But in some ways, I think this year is the year that is going to reward. It's like the year of ADHD because the work for me has become jumping between quads. It's become managing quads. And so it's not so much about deep work. It's about how good am I about context switching and jumping across multiple different contexts very quickly.
Could I add that from what I understand, what all you said, maybe we could add one thing, which is adaptability, because you're saying, of course, that ADHD and you can jump across, but of course, earlier you were very good at focusing deeply on one thing as well. And what strikes me about you, and maybe this is true for other people as well, you're just kind of very open to adapting your working style and seeing what works well for this stage, especially when things are changing. I think that one certain thing we can be sure is whenever the next model comes out, it'll change again. You need to be curious and open to adapting how you work, right?
Yeah.
And as closing, what's a book or books that you would recommend?
I've gone down the Cixin Liu rabbit hole. So he's the three-body problem guy, but he actually has a lot of other really great books. I really love his short stories. He has a couple books of short stories. I'm a big fan. For people that are new to sci-fi and you want a little bit harder sci-fi, I really love Accelerondo by Strauss. This is a book I would totally recommend. It's essentially the product roadmap for the next 50 years. It starts with takeoff kind of starting to happen and kind of AI singularity, and then it ends up with this kind of group of lobster consciousnesses orbiting Jupiter, and it's just amazing. And the thing that I think it really captures is just the pace, this quickening pace of how this feels. It really matches the feeling right now. And then on the technical side, I would strongly recommend functional programming in Scala. Even if language choice just doesn't matter as much anymore, I think there is this art to functional programming that just teaches you how to code better, and it'll just teach you how to think in types. If you read this book, I think what's really important is to do the exercises also, and I've gone through and I've done all of them probably 3 times over, and it's just amazing. It really just knocks this idea of functional types into your head, and it's just a thing you can't stop thinking about.
Of course. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Fergie.
This was a really interesting conversation. And the thing that I keep coming back to is to Morris's printing press analogy. The idea that medieval scribe were this tiny elite who could write, employed by kings who themselves.
Okay, so we're done with the fucking video. I'm gonna open YouTube again to see if there's anything left. Why do I do this to myself? Okay, there is one video, but it's just 8 minutes. This is also a cool video, but it's too long. Oh my god, I really don't want this.
All right, so
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my room. Of course, I'm gonna take you guys with me, and what we're gonna do is just do some shit and then get into bed, get ready to sleep, but of course we're still gonna work for at least 1 hour, maybe 1.5 hours. So yeah, that's the plan. Every night I just check that I've closed my door, that I turn off the lights, and then turn on a light. Okay, so you guys wait here. I'm gonna be back in hopefully 5 minutes. Okay, sorry for the delay again. I think this time I wasn't too late. Yeah. Let's watch some MKBHD. Well, it sucks, but yeah, today's time is being spent watching freaking YouTube videos. Like 2 hours of today's time. It's too fucking long, man.
Apple is doing a week of new release stuff, and it's all headlined by what I saw today, which is the newest, cheapest entry to the MacBook lineup, the MacBook Neo. First of all, interesting name. We've never heard that word from Apple before. I thought when it was leaked, it was maybe just a code name. I would have bet it's just called the MacBook, but no, it's actually MacBook Neo. And the basics are this. It is a 13-inch laptop powered by the A18 Pro chip, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of starting storage, and it is a super thin and decently light all aluminum laptop. 2 USB Type-C ports on the left-hand side, not Thunderbolt. There's a headphone jack on the left as well, and then there's some side-firing stereo speakers, and it comes in 4 colors: indigo, blush, citrus, and silver. They all have this sort of a whitish keyboard that is kind of tinted to match the color of the laptop. In person, maybe the lighting is terrible in here, but it was kind of hard to tell when looking at a single laptop. But you can, when they're so next to each other, see that the keyboards are tinted. And there's a 1080p webcam up at the top, hidden in that bezel, no notch. And most importantly, the starting price,
Why
$500.
am I watching this? I'm never gonna get it.
Fun was acquired by Anthropic. OpenClaw acquired by OpenAI. Is OpenCode next? The name-wise, it'd be pretty good. OpenAI, OpenCode.
Yeah.
So
People say like, oh, it's okay if it's shitty, it's intentional to go fast. Not really. Someone better than you didn't have to make those trade-offs and they ship just as fast.
Agentic coding is here to stay, but there's a lot of confusion on what that actually means. We've seen prominent engineers mention that they are handwriting zero code nowadays, delegating this work now to tools such as OpenCode, which has been in particular blowing up the last few months. And I got a chance to sit down and speak with one of the creators of it, Dax. We spoke about how they're viewing this competition and agentic coding race, their competing vision of what the future of coding should actually look like, as well as how they would approach an acquisition offer, even from a company like OpenAI. I want to thank our sponsors, PostHog and Greptile. More about them later in the video. OpenCode has really been exploding over the last 2 months, especially I think since December. Could you take us back a little bit and just kind of get into how OpenCode started? What's the story and how did you get to where you are now?
Our company has been doing open source work for a long time. Me personally, it's been probably 5 or 6 years now. So we've been in the space. We have been building tools for developers. We've seen various companies come and go, different phases of it. So we have a lot of experience with building open source stuff. Our previous project, SST, was decently popular, nothing close to OpenCode, but it basically gave us all the practice in terms of how you start an open source project, how do you make it successful, what does it look like running it day to day, what are the advantages you have from being open source, what are the disadvantages. So we had been in the space for a while. We got to profitability, and it was just the 3 of us at the company. We got to profitability with that product in I guess it's crazy how recent this all was, maybe in February of 2025, so about a year ago. And that kind of let us step back a bit and be like, what should we do? Should we continue working on this? Should we explore other ideas? AI obviously is just a thing for this decade, and it would feel kind of stupid if we just entirely ignored it. So we were playing around with some ideas on what can we do with AI for developers, what can we do with AI in general. Tried a few ideas. None of them really stuck. There were some things that we found that were pretty interesting and useful for us, but we couldn't figure out how to turn it into an actual product. And it was around that time we started adopting Claude Code. And we'd seen, AI.
Interesting. You mentioned you guys reached profitability in February 2025, and that's, I think, exactly when Claude Code actually came out. And I think you mentioned SST, and I want to get into that a little bit later because I think some of the parallels, even though it's kind of, it's a dev tool and it's kind of in a similar space, but I think the parallels of building that are kind of interesting. I think you touched on this a while back, but you mentioned Claude Code was the first tool that kind of actually stuck with you. What exactly does your developer workflow look like day to day right now? How much has it changed? Because you kind of have an interesting perspective because you're actually building one of these tools to make it better. So not only are you building it for other users, but you kind of have, building a developer tool as a developer kind of gives you a unique insight. So what's been your experience?
Yeah. So the reason the reason Cursor didn't stick for me or other people on my team is because we all are Vim users. We do everything in our terminal. We really enjoy the Vim experience of editing text. And that's why moving over to Cursor was a big lift because it's you still have to edit text in Cursor, but now it's a worse text editing experience to gain some benefits that we didn't like. So the reason Claude Code stuck was we could still keep our editor, but then we had this separate area where we could do AI stuff and they weren't stepping on each other. I think that's a big thing for us. I think Cursor was like a progressive step to doing AI coding things, where like they would kind of take you slowly from editor to like the newer ideas with coding with AI. And there's some benefits of that, but for me and for a lot of people, it was like an uncomfortable middle where it felt like I want to use my editor for text editing. I don't want all this AI stuff popping up everywhere. Like when I used Cursor, it just felt like I was getting suggestions all over the place. There was like all these new UI panels, and like I like the idea of the agent saying like it's like a dumb person sitting next to me that I could like look over and see what they're doing every once in a while and like give them some feedback, let them go do my own thing, split up work. So just simple fact that Cloud Code was like somewhere else outside my editor, I think that was like a key thing for us. And we continue to like explore that with Open Code. In that separate place, how rich of an experience can we give you for the various things that you want to do when talking to agents? But my setup is still the same. Like I use NeoVim when I'm editing, and I use the agent when I want to do agent stuff. Obviously, we're all using agents more and more to do, unless we're spending less and less time in the editor. But I'm nowhere near the type of person that's like, oh, I'm fully off the editor and I'm like not ever writing code manually, or I still heavily use the editor and I edit text a lot.
There's been a lot of like discourse about that specifically, that nobody, and we've seen really, really accomplished, smart people saying that they are not writing a single line of code from scratch anymore. And I want to get your take on that, because I think partially it could be interpreted as maybe marketing if it's coming from somebody at a company who's, maybe pushing one of these tools, and you're also working on a company that has one of these tools. And so what exactly does that mean? When you see somebody saying that they're not writing any code from scratch anymore, like a lot of people interpret that as saying that coding is dead. How do you interpret that?
Yeah, I find those statements confusing, because if you ask me like how much code do I write manually, I actually don't know. It's very confusing. I'm not like, it's like hard to tell. Like I'm like jumping in and out of both of these tools. If they're saying their editor is basically non-existent and they're entirely in these like agentic coding tools, whether it's Open Code or Codex or one of these other things, I would find that very surprising, because these tools, one, aren't great for looking at code. So are they also saying that they're never reviewing it, or are they pushing up to GitHub and reviewing it there? And then two, when I'm designing something new, or I'm like working on a difficult feature, of course, when I'm like iterating on something that exists, like we need another button that does X, Y, Z. Like, yeah, that's a very easy prompt, and I probably don't really have to even look at code that it gets generated, because it's probably very similar to what's already around it. But when I'm like working on something new or something challenging, or I'm working on a new design for something, me typing out code is the process by which I'm figuring out what we should even be doing. I have a really tough time just sitting there and like writing out a giant spec on here's exactly how the feature should work. I like writing out types. I like writing out how some of the functions might play together. I like playing with folder structure to see what different concepts should be. And there's all stuff I think most programs have always done. I don't really see a good reason why I would stop that personally, because it's like how I figure out what to do. But yeah, so when people say that, I have a probably kind of cynical take when people say that. There's actually no reason to, like, I think there's this kind of pressure that everyone feels where they feel like this big change coming, and they feel the need to like convince themselves mostly that writing out a giant spec on here's exactly how the feature should work. I like writing out types. I like writing out how some of the functions might play together. I like playing with folder structure to see what the different concepts should be. And this is all stuff that I think most programmers have always done. I don't really see a good reason why I would stop that personally, because it's like how I figure out what to do. But yeah, so when people say that, I have a probably kind of cynical take when people say that. There's actually no reason to, like, I think there's this kind of pressure that everyone feels where they feel like this big change coming, and they feel the need to like convince themselves mostly that they're on the cutting edge of this change, and they're not going to be one of these people that are like left behind. There's a narrative that like it's going to wipe out a bunch of people, and a few people are going to survive. So I think there's like this like bias to reduce this stuff. Like the moment like one thing works, it's to express it as like, wow, this thing worked, now everything is working, and kind of exaggerate. So it's a little bit hard to understand what people really mean when they say that, just because there's all this other stuff going on like emotionally and psychologically that makes us all want to like kind of exaggerate what the current state of things are.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I wouldn't even necessarily say it's intentional. I use the word marketing, but I think Boris, one of the original creators of Cloud Code, he's made certain statements about not having much code written from scratch, but he's also recently made statements saying, justifying why Anthropic is continuing to hire developers, saying that there's still a ton of human involvement in that. So I think it's confusing, I think, kind of like you said, but yeah, it's
not. Yeah, I wouldn't even. Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't say it's malicious. I think we're all excited, and I think people are like a little scared too. And they like all these things coming together. I think it's very hard to interpret what people are saying. The thing I've always said, we're in this phase of AI, but there's been phases like this before where there's like a new way to do things, a new tech, whatever it is, new framework, and you kind of see a similar thing where they're like, this new thing has totally changed how I do everything. I now do everything in this way, and you'll see a lot of people talking about that. And a clear filter, the filter's always existed, and it continues to apply to today. Use the product they built with it. Oftentimes it doesn't even exist because it's just people like playing with stuff, not actually doing anything. But actually use the resulting thing. Oftentimes it's not any better. It's not like maybe it's a bit worse in a lot of cases. I think we definitely feel that when we use these tools built by people that are expressing, hey, I'm doing everything with AI. These tools exist, so maybe they couldn't exist without it, but they're also not. They don't feel that great either. So I think that kind of shows what reality is today.
Right. Yeah, I want to switch gears a bit and talk, I guess, about competition. I take it that you're probably a pretty competitive person, and the reason I say that is because I think you had an interesting take with SST, which for people who don't know is kind of, I guess you could say, just a better experience over certain like AWS infrastructure and tools, and just kind of giving you a better experience for that. But not everything, I guess, is a competition. Not everything necessarily takes away from someone else. And now that you're working on Open Code, from the outside picture, it obviously looks like you guys are direct competitors. Do you see it that way? And do you see with what's recently happened with kind of Anthropic cracking down on reusing the Anthropic subscription directly within Open Code, which there's workarounds for right now? But with that happening recently, how is like your opinion changed on like the competition aspect of it? Did you originally see this as a competition? And if not, do you see it as a competition now?
Yeah. So I'll talk about this. It is very complicated. So generally, I will say that I don't believe like I'm not someone who believes the world is zero sum. I think most systems in the world are set up for everyone's benefit. That doesn't mean that every microcosm of the world is not zero sum. And when it comes to business, people love to like, and this is like PR speak constantly. Like you'll see some big companies, even small companies, acting like, oh, like we're like, even though we're competitors, like we can all win. Or they kind of paint this like rosy picture of like it's all of us doing stuff together. That's not true. Like business is just like sports. Like you and another company are competing for alternate visions of the world, and it might not be something where like one side entirely wins or the other side entirely wins. But that there's real competition there. And I think people like to deny it because I don't know. I think the public wants to believe this like kind of everything is like nice and positive type of thing. I don't think competition is negative. I think it's just like sports. Like there, two teams want to compete. They're gonna like want to kill the other team. On some level, they kind of respect each other because they're both at the top of their game doing something. But there are winners and losers, and you do want to crush your opponents. So I'm competitive, and I do think about things in that way. The other thing though is something that people don't think about that much. Positioning is extremely important, and even though your products might look similar and look competitive, your positioning might have zero overlap. So if you look at everything that OpenCode has done, I think we've done a decent job on product, but any of our success is really coming from our positioning. We basically looked at the market and we were like, it's very likely that competition between models continues to be a big thing. Not just the frontier models, but also open source models is going to continue to be a thing. There's going to be a lot of pressure for prices to come down. There's tons of companies purely focused on inference. So we just saw like a lot of like chaos happening in the model realm. So positioning wise, it's good to build a tool that's not tied to a single model because we benefit whenever like one model tries to beat another one, which we thought doesn't happen a lot. And two, we want to be the number one open source position. We are extremely competitive with anyone trying to be like the open source coding tool company because that is the one position that we want to defend. We think that's a valuable position because historically, all dev tools eventually end up being open source. Like there's definitely room for proprietary ones, but the default ones tend to be open source. Your database is open source, used to be proprietary. Even like C compilers were proprietary at some point, now they're open source. If you look at almost everything that's in your stack, editors, etc., the majority of the market goes to the open source option. So I don't feel like we're technically competitive with Cloud Code in positioning because they are not trying to do that. They're trying to build like a vertically integrated experience, which there's always gonna be room in the market for. We just don't really care about that side of it. So they continue to do their thing. That's fine. But then if you dig one layer deeper, there is just like rivalry and like competition and like there's values that we care about that are in conflict with theirs, and we want to show that our values lead to better results. So we're definitely gonna be like naturally competitive from that point of view.
Right, that makes sense. And up next, we talk about why OpenCode has been so successful so far, and also how the team has already reacted to acquisition offers that they've already received. One of my most interesting parts was when we talk about how AI has made shipping code faster and shipping features, but it actually hasn't made it any easier to actually know what to ship in the first place. If anything, it's actually made it harder because it's so easy to just throw out a bunch of features, even if nobody actually cares about those features. So I want to introduce our sponsor, PostHog, which for me, when I'm working on NeetCode.io, helps me solve the problem of what I should actually be building and what users actually care about. PostHog makes it really easy to know how users are engaging with your app, how they're finding your app, why they might be dropping off of your app. For example, on NeetCode, we recently added a streak feature, and that helped increase retention a ton. So when you add a feature, whether it's easy to add or difficult to add, you need to know whether it made any sort of impact or not, because sometimes you can add a feature and people actually don't.
You know, the funny thing about Smalltalk is that most people look at it like the opening band at a concert, something you suffer through to get to the main event. Deep conversations, the real connections. That's what we all want, right? But if you leave your phone for 2 minutes and actually looked around, you'd realize every interaction, every relationship starts with small talk. Even your best friend started with, so what classes are you taking? Or some equally awkward nonsense. Now, here's an unpopular take. Small talk is not about what you say. Well, for the most part, it's actually more about making the other person feel like a human instead of a Sims character waiting for input. That's it. You don't need a cheat code, a script, or even charisma. You need to learn one thing: active observation. Okay, I know it sounds like something a nerd would say, but just hear me out. Active observation is about paying attention to the person in front of you like they're the only thing that exists in that moment. Not their vibe, not their aura, just the actual tangible details. Their shirt, their drink, the way they keep glancing at the clock like they'd rather be anywhere else. You notice these things, and then you comment on them in a way that invites, not demands, a response. That's it. Matter of fact, I can just end this video right here, but stay with me now. Trust me, it'll be worth your while. Anyways, let me explain why this works. First, people love to feel seen, not in a cringe, you're so deep in a serious way, but in the simple, hey, I noticed you exist way. It's basic psychology. Humans are hardwired to crave acknowledgement. Second, it's disarming. When you make an observation, you're not putting pressure on them to perform. You're not hitting them with, so what do you do? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years? You're just tossing a ball in their direction and seeing if they want to throw it back. Here's an example. You're at a coffee shop, and the person next to you is holding a book. Most people would say, what are you reading? Because they think that's the polite thing to do. Wrong. That's pressure. You're asking them to explain, justify, or summarize, and no one wants to do that. Instead, you say, that book looks like it's been through some things. Boom. You just made an observation, and you've done it in a way that's neutral but interesting. Maybe they'll laugh and say, yeah, it's my third reread. Or maybe they'll say, oh, it's terrible. I just want to finish it out of spite. Either way, you've started a conversation without making them feel like they're being interviewed. Or let's say you're at a party, which, if you're an introvert, is probably your worst nightmare. Someone walks by holding a plate of food that looks questionable. Instead of ignoring them or hiding in the corner, you say, is that the chicken? It looks like it fought back. Again, you're not asking a question. You're making an observation, and you're doing it in a way that invites humor. Maybe they'll laugh and agree. Maybe they'll even defend the chicken. Either way, you've opened the door. The beauty of active observation is that it works everywhere. Work meetings, first dates, family gatherings, you name it. It's flexible, it's simple, and best of all, it takes the focus off you. You don't have to be charming or witty. You just have to notice stuff and point it out. Simple as that. But now that you know active observation is all about noticing the little things, patterns, details, the stuff most people gloss over. What if I told you there's a way to apply that same principle, but for learning? That's where today's sponsor comes in. Brilliant. Brilliant is kind of like, solving problems. No, the kind of org slash out and paying attention to your surroundings like you're the main character in a detective show. What are people wearing? What are they doing? Are they fidgeting? It's a bold color choice. I respect it. Done. Do this, the easier it gets. You start to realize that small talk doesn't
like it. So it's important to know that. You don't really know that unless you're using some kind of tool. And PostHog makes it super, super easy. Honestly, I wish I was using it a lot earlier. It's really easy to set up. It has a generous free tier. You can even self-host it. It's open source, so you can do that if you really want to. Some of my favorite features are, one, the feature flag, which is a pretty, I would say, mandatory feature. You need it one way or another, and PostHog makes it pretty easy to integrate that. Boom, million, where they're on. It's easy to use. It has integration with other, well, it has workarounds for Cloud Code, it has direct integration with OpenAI. But you're saying that, like, positioning-wise, you're saying that the quality of the tool is as good as it is, and as much as that matters, you're saying that it's actually more important that, I guess the bullet points in my head are that it's open source, that you can switch between models very easily. There's no sort of lock-in. And maybe third is that you guys were probably the first, like, big open source tool that's doing this. And, like, that first mover advantage. Would you say that those three things, like, positioning-wise, are the main contributors?
Yeah, I would say that those are the umbrella, and they kind of manifest as like 1,000 little things that you have to do to actually successfully do those things. So, for example, why be open source? The benefit is you get way more eyes on it, trying it in different environments than you can internally, which means open code from the beginning has been designed to like sneak its way into every type of environment. If you're someone with a super locked down enterprise laptop and your company only has access to Amazon Bedrock, we made sure that's worked. But Amazon Bedrock has ports in different regions. Like, we cover all of those like tedious little things to make sure that this can kind of work across the board. And being open source helps a lot because we can't really recreate those environments, but other people can, and they can submit issues and fixes for it. So yeah, it's the benefit of being open source is you can cover like a long tail. I mean, long tail type scenario you can kind of cover really well. I was gonna say, but to go back to the original point, yeah, like, I think if our product was half as good, I think we'd probably still be equally as successful because the majority of our success comes from that doing those positioning things correctly.
Right. Yeah, and I guess that's probably a big part that most people overlook nowadays. And yeah. In terms of like the competition aspect of it, one last interesting thing I was curious about was OpenAI is taking sort of a different route, at least in the relationship with you guys. What is that relationship, and why is OpenAI doing it differently?
Yeah, so this kind of, again, goes back to positioning. Like, if we're the open source option, it means we have a shot at being like a standard that other people build on top of or we get embedded in places. So even prior to the OpenAI thing, we had been working with GitHub, GitLab, JetBrains, trying to convince everyone that, hey, you guys offer LM's service, and you guys have a pool of people that want to use agentic coding. Just bless open code as the great way to do that because we're putting a lot more time into it than you guys are doing with native tools, and people seem to like it. And we convinced a bunch of them like that, hey, this is a good idea, let's do it. We had enough of them on board that I was able to then go to OpenAI and say, hey, like, if you see that the industry is supporting this, like, are you guys willing to support it too? The reason I went to them is because one, they're again going to competition. They're in competition with Anthropic. Anthropic is winning in terms of mindshare for coding. For them, they can only gain from doing something like this. Like, PR-wise, practically getting more users and using Codex. I also timed asking them like the day before Anthropic blocked Cloud Max and OpenCode. So I just kind of told them this is happening. Like, I think we didn't get any advance notice. It just got blocked the night before, and we ended up messaging them. And yeah, they kind of saw the opportunity just to counter position. So yeah, I don't know if this means fundamentally they like embrace this type of setup, or if it's just exploiting these kind of short-term incentives they had to try to beat Anthropic. But that's really what our company does well. Like, we're good at figuring out these things and like applying pressure in the right spot to get something to fold in a way that's good for ourselves and really like all our users and usually the open source community broadly. Because that also made it so other coding agents like Pi also got access to OpenAI plans. So yeah, like I said, it's all just playing these people against each other, trying to understand their incentives, trying to create a good situation. We've done this before. Typically, it usually ends up looking like you have like one company that you can kind of position as like the bad guy, and you kind of get the rest of the industry to like be on the other side of it, and you can kind of make things happen that way.
Right. And I think it's kind of funny that it's sort of changing very, very quickly. Who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? And like you said, even like as OpenAI's incentives change, they might change their mind about certain things as well. On that note, we've seen really interesting acquisitions happening lately. I think a couple months ago, Bun was acquired by Anthropic, which I think probably caught a lot of people by surprise. And recently, we've seen OpenClaw acquired by OpenAI. Is OpenCode next? Like, the name-wise, it'd be pretty good, OpenAI, OpenCode. So yeah, and I guess what would be the calculus like behind a decision like that?
Yeah, and I think what I'm going to say is probably true for a lot of founders. We have spent a lot of years building companies to various successes. We've always dreamed of building in a much bigger market than we were. Like, with every company you build, you're like, next time I want to go for something bigger. And you spend so much of your life looking for that. The day you find it, which, we found it with OpenCode, now we're serving a market that's like 30, 50 million developers. Like, we could reach all of them. That's like pretty crazy that we're probably going to do that. Wanting to hand that over is a very difficult decision. This is a thing that you spent years searching for. And your floor of success, like, even if things go to shit, are like, it's like still like pretty good. So these offers tend to be less tempting compared against this thing we're looking for forever. So we've had plenty of acquisition offers come our way already in the past couple months. We haven't like pursued any of them. Someone would have to like drastically overpay, which to be honest has happened. Like, AI stuff is crazy. Like, we've seen some acquisitions last year that were like kind of absurd numbers wise. So overpaying is not out of the question. But I'm actually very proud of our team because I had a specific story where CEO of a company called me and they were like, hey, we're interested in acquiring you guys. I talked to them about it a little bit and I was like, I don't know if this will work out, but I'll talk to the team. I posted in their team chat, like, hey, like, this company wants to acquire us. Everyone ignored me. They just kept talking about like product stuff. They were working on other stuff. And I pinged everyone again. And then someone replied being like, tell them to fuck off until we had another zero. And it's not like we like even talk about numbers or anything, but it was really cool to see that the whole team is really aligned and trying to take this all the way and not like trying to cash out something pretty quick.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And yeah, that's why I asked about like the calculus behind it, because I think like in the case of Bun, Jared, for example, he's obviously been working on this. Like, he did not get into this for the money. He would not have created that project for the money, but it did end up working out for him in the end. I think not only did it work out for him, I think it probably worked out for Bun as well, in the sense that probably for a long time, I'm not an expert on how many people are working on Bun, but he was probably the main single point of failure. And I would say that while you guys have a small team, it is set up somewhat differently. So yeah, I think that does make sense.
Yeah, and like, every founder, I'm saying this now, if you talk to me again after a couple of years and it turns out I was a slog and really struggling, my willingness to sell is going to be totally different. Like, what companies is always about, can you continue to stay motivated every single day? Any company that becomes huge is because the founders successfully did that for years and years and years. And it's very hard to do that. And a lot of acquisitions happen because, like, even the company might be doing well, making progress, maybe the progress isn't as fast as the founder's hoping, or it seems like infinite work ahead of them. Sometimes that's when these acquisitions happen. And again, like, they're great acquisitions for everyone, including employees. But yeah, we're trying to go all the way, at least as of now.
Yeah, right. I want to switch gears and talk about the future of coding. I'm not going to ask you to look inside your crystal ball and precisely predict the future, but I still want to talk about, I think the big thing that I think about is...
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of pointless streaming anymore. I'm still gonna do some shit for like maybe 1 more hour, but today was like a wasted stream. I was just watching YouTube videos. I'm gonna finish that video and hopefully do some work. Yeah. But we're gonna have to find a solution for that. I think the solution for that is gonna be I can only watch YouTube while I'm having dinner and not continue beyond it. But also, a lot of times, it's just like on a particular day, I get way too many good recommendations or subscription notifications. So it fucks it up. But, like, maybe, for example, tomorrow, I don't get any good YouTube video to watch. So it balances out. But I'm not going to rely on that. I'm just not going to watch YouTube beyond when I have dinner, right? And if I'm watching a video while I'm having dinner, I'm gonna end it, but yeah, I'm not gonna watch any new videos. Maybe put them in a queue so that when I'm watching it next. So I think YouTube has a feature to put stuff in some queue, right? Yeah, I don't know. I thought I saw something. Maybe it's not there anymore. But yeah, there used to be maybe a feature to put YouTube videos in a queue. Maybe like if you're oh yeah, you can do something like this. Love this girl. I remember this. I hate this. Yeah, so for example, let's add this to queue. So I'm assuming because I did that,
As of now.
Yeah, right.
once this finishes, maybe that'll start. But yeah, I'll see about that. I think that's it for today. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you, 0 of you guys, for joining. Even though I did not do anything productive today. Tomorrow for sure, we're gonna kick ass. All right. Why am I talking as if I'm drunk? I'm just sleepy. Are those two things the same? No. Anyway, that's it for today. Bye bye. End stream.